Hello, this is Jaco, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to be here doing this again so soon, but here I am making another Splatoon Raiders trailer analysis and speculation video. Most of the stuff I'm covering here is from the recent Nintendo Direct trailer for Raiders and the subsequent Nintendo Treehouse event coverage. Without further ado, let's dive on in. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the Direct, there's one other thing I have to touch on. This clip that came from a TV spot released a week or so before the Direct, which shows the boot gadget in action. Yep, it's some kind of lunging splashdown style attack. I do wonder how much control you'll have over the lunge distance, but other than that, it seems pretty straightforward. Now, onto the main Direct stuff. First off, the single player armor mechanic is back. Not only that, but for the first time ever in a Splatoon game, you'll know exactly how much health you have at any given moment. Because those UI bars in the bottom left corner, yeah, those are actually a health bar and a personal experience bar. Leveling up, of course, gives both stat increases and skill points. The skill points are applied on at least the ink tanks, seemingly working on all tanks simultaneously. Remember though, if this upgrade perk from the previous trailer is anything to go by, the ink tanks also have perk slots similar to the gadgets. And by the looks of it, we might also finally be learning about this mysterious limiter thing that was first mentioned by Marina back in Octo Expansion when explaining why Agent 3 could use special weapons so frequently. Because also on this upgrade screen is a bar filling to a limiter release. I can't wait to see more information about what this does and how it works. And hopefully a bit of lore too while they're at it. One last thing, the Treehouse crew showed jumping into a level. Oh, I say jumping, but really it's riding the bot in, because yeah, there is a spot in the exploration bot for the mechanic to ride in during deployment, which is pretty cool. Now, onto the main weapon info. There's a lot to cover here. First off, we can add chargers, specifically Squiffer, dualies, specifically Glugas it looks like, and blasters, specifically regular blaster, to the pile of weapon classes now confirmed to be in Raiders, leaving just Brellas and Splatonas yet to be confirmed. Also, the main weapons have some kind of upgrade perks. It seems likely that either the perk slots, or perhaps the perks themselves, are unlocked by leveling up the weapons. Oh, and via the Treehouse footage, we've learned how weapons are acquired as salmonid loot drops. Yes, this means you can get multiple copies of the same main weapon, and yes, they each seem to be leveled up individually. This begs the question, do you have the option to get rid of extra weapons? Maybe by breaking them down for parts or spiralite. Or do you directly sacrifice them to level up other main weapons? Similar to how weapon crafting works in the Hyrule Warriors games. Also, there seems to be some kind of star rarity for main weapons. At this point, who knows what exactly it can affect? There's a bit too much possibility for me to say. Hopefully it's touched upon in the Raiders specific Direct in a couple weeks. Two last things to note from this Treehouse footage screenshot. There is even more proof of the existence of multiple weapons from each class. As you can see, there are two different models of blasters here. If the one we saw in the trailer is regular blaster, then is this more square looking one range blaster, based on the similar look. It's definitely not the model changing based on level, as some of the regular blasters are both higher and lower levels compared to this square one. Also, this roller is different compared to the dynamo looking one we saw in the previous trailer. At first, you might default to thinking that this one is a splat roller, like I did. But given the handle parts, is it actually Big Swig? Given Squiffer seems to be the first charger you get, I can see a reason for Swig being the starting roller, ditching the traditional multiplayer unlock order in favor of one more suited to this game, with range and or damage stats being on the weaker end first, and getting stronger as you go. Before I move on, I am curious. What main weapons do you most want to be in Raiders, if it ends up that not every main weapon gets included? Since Dynamo is already confirmed, mine are probably going to be Ballpoint Splatling, Dowser Doolies, and Tentabrella, with Explosher as a close fourth. Also, do you think they might create any new main weapons for Raiders? Personally, I don't think they will, but I suppose only time will tell. I suppose there is also the idea that they could bring the Grisco weapons in, but I don't know, lore-wise, not that lore's ever stopped Nintendo from doing stuff, but lore-wise it doesn't really fit, so I personally would say no. I would rather see other main weapons be upgraded to be more like the Grisco weapons than the Grisco weapons themselves being added in. Alright, now it's time to get into the new gadget info. First up, we have a couple more names. That turret, it's called the Shot Pot. As usual, the Splatoon localization team showing their brilliant ability to create pun names. And those ink orbiter things, they're called Splatolytes. Now, one of the new ones shown in this trailer is a top that can home in on an initial target, continues going after splatting that target, bounces off walls, and after a set amount of time, slows down and explodes. Shown here in the trailer, deploying two of them at once is definitely an effect from an upgrade. Anyways, the name for it was shown in the Treehouse footage, the Spin Wheel. They also showed that buoy-looking one in action. It acts like a floating sea mine once deployed, and is manually detonated by shooting it. It seems like you can store up and then throw out multiple at once without a cooldown, though this does likely involve some amount of upgrades. Also, notice how they chain together with a band of ink? Something I noticed in the last trailer is that every gadget was only ever shown equipped to a specific ink tank, and that still remains true here. I also speculated about each tank looking like they have an attribute. Well, you know how there's a special Raiders-themed collaboration Splatfest coming up? The theme looks suspiciously like it proves my ink tank attribute speculations somewhat correct. I'd guessed the attributes looked like power, mobility, and support, the third one being a best guess, inspired mostly by the purple color chipset inside order. Well, the Splatfest theme is power, speed, or tactics. Speed and mobility feel pretty synonymous here, and I definitely think tactics fits far better than support does. And hey, if the gadgets truly are going to be tied to a single ink tank, now we have some official category classification terms for them. Now, onto the Salmonids. Do you remember how there was a Splatchet scene with a beefed up, jumbo-sized version of a Stinger? Well, there's another jumbo boss in this trailer. This time a Salty Tongue, with a ranged attack that is basically Splatoon 1's Killer Whale. Also, in the Japanese version of this trailer, two of the scenes were slightly different. The one with the Jumbo Salty, and the scene right after it, the frosty one with the blaster. Yep, that's both a Drizzler and a Flyfish. The Flyfish in particular has some interesting changes. The cockpit is completely open and exposed, with no glass covering. And the missile launchers don't have lids that open up, and only have 3 missile slots instead of 4. This redesign seems to be how they're getting around the Splat Bomb issue, but in lore, given how Flyfish are like peak Salmonid technology, or at least were when they were first introduced in Splatoon 2, it doesn't make much sense for them not to appear in this game, I feel like, so at least that's consistent. Assuming my theory about Salty Tongues replacing Moz was correct, this leaves Flipper Floppers as the final unconfirmed boss Salmonid. Next up, they finally showed a big shot. Although, it seems like they're not cannoneers this time. Instead of using a cannon to attack, they hop around on some kind of pogo stick contraption and physically slam their cannonballs on the ground to generate the wavebreaker shockwaves they're known for. Now, onto some lesser stuff. Do you remember the tongs-wielding chum in the other trailer? Turns out Cohawks can also wield them, and the Treehouse commentators mentioned the tongs wielded by these lessers give them increased attack range. I doubt a small fry would be able to lift tongs that big though, but there's probably a similar equivalent for small fry. This frosty scene also showed a couple other lesser variants. A chum riding a pogo spring, kind of like the big shot hopper, and also this new type of lesser that looks kind of explodey. Perhaps it works similar to the octopod, Octarian enemies. Now for a brief speculation detour about one of the thoughts I've had since I posted my other Raiders video. Will any of Salmon Run's 8 night waves appear in Splatoon Raiders? How might they be incorporated, and how likely are they to show up? Fog will almost certainly show up. After all, there were alternate stages and even a challenge rotation with the fog effect, and that is the main gimmick of the wave. I think grillers have a good chance of showing up as well, since they are the salmonid version of the Octarian flutters. I could see a special level based on a Cohawk charge, where the only lessers that spawn are Cohawks. They could even stick a cannon or two in, if those end up being a single-player mechanic that returns in this game. No golden eggs means no goldies, although I suppose a Goldie-esque salmonid caked in spiralite crystal, or even potentially carrying a chest, could work for a seeking-style level, especially if there's an objective type where you have to collect a certain amount of spiralite crystal. Glowfly's Rush, or Salmonid Rush, or as people call it, Glowflies, could make for an insane level, but if it doesn't mesh very well with the level design philosophy of Raiders, then it probably won't show up. It could be interesting though. Mothership could have a level built around surviving an assault coming from a mothership, though I don't think this is likely. Tornado likewise could have a giant tornado in the background, which throws salmonids at you, like in the event wave, but it's also not that likely. Mudmouths, I'm going to say a flat no on account of them requiring splat bombs to be defeated. I guess that didn't stop Flyfish from showing up though. What are you guys' thoughts on if and how Salmon Run's night waves could appear in Splatoon Raiders? Now for some more miscellaneous stuff. Something I didn't pick up on from the previous trailer is that all of the island names are anagrams, mostly of food. Spada Island, try pasta. Zapis makes pizza. Puos? That's just soup backwards. Erp can be turned into prep, fitting for the first island after the tutorial. And speaking of that tutorial, we can see here that it's called Lehlo Island. Yeah, the first island name unscrambles to hello. Taigoro, I couldn't figure out, so I turned to the internet. And lo and behold, somebody's already done the work of unscrambling the island names on the Splatoon wiki. Turns out, Taigoro unscrambles to yogurt. I did wonder if the level name, Tomato, unscrambled to anything, but I guess I'm not the only one who came to the conclusion it's just supposed to sound similar to tomato. And tomato soup is a kind of soup, which begs the question, how synergistic will the level and island names be? Is there going to be a riff on pepperoni or cheese for level names on Zappiz? Alfredo, spaghetti, fettuccine, any kind of pasta and or sauce type for Spada? I look forward to seeing how creative the devs get. Also, while we're still here on the map screen, I do wonder, will the hideout ship be stuck to this one spot on the map, or will it move around? It is a ship after all. Well, more a raft than a ship, but I digress. Going back to Tomato Rocks, the Treehouse footage showed a more complete version of the level select menu. Some of these details are likely due to the level already having been completed in the footage, like the bit showing the main salmonid encounters in the level. The biggest reveal here is that sunken scrolls are back. I suspect this call for help button will be for starting a multiplayer raid, which brings to mind a different question. How does loot get distributed in co-op raids? After all, the Treehouse crew did both show and mention how the loot collection works in single player. You don't actually have to walk up to loot drops to collect them. They will be collected automatically by you moving far enough away, or by completing the level. They also mentioned that if you quit out of a level early, you still get to keep all of the loot that you've gathered up until that point. So that'll be nice if you need to grind specific parts. I suppose the most likely solution to the co-op loot distribution is probably that everybody gets a copy of the entire loot pile brought in. I suppose only time will tell though. The scene with the Jumbo Salty also showed a new objective type, collecting power eggs. There is also what appears to be a timer counting down next to the power egg meter, meaning this level, and likely others too, have a time limit. Given the sub-level 1 text in the top right corner, this is likely one of the dungeon levels. This does beg the question of what other kind of objectives there could be besides this and following the treasure radar. The treehouse footage showed a new type of stage object, odd plants. They specifically gave a spotlight to this one that gives the same high jump with slow falling effects as the bot hop does. But did you notice this one? That's basically a balloonfish. There was also one other shown in the main trailer, the one that creates a salmonid freezing icy blast when shot. This one's pretty quick. Dash pads exist. That's one more returning single player feature on the pile. These wooden surfing boards were also shown in the treehouse footage. They're basically a one-way transport between sections of a level. The same type of function that many other single-player gimmicks tend to end up serving, like the launch pads, or perhaps more aptly in this case, the grind rails, or ride rails. The treehouse crew also showed the hourglass-looking pickup, which was shown in a previous image. I hesitated to say my guess that it could be a gadget cooldown refresh, but turns out that is in fact what it does. Also, they called it Salt, which has some pretty interesting lore implications, I must say. And finally, there's this table full of junk on the hideout ship. Or maybe I should say spare parts, ready and waiting to be made into gadgets. And that's everything. Well, maybe not everything. There's a chance I've missed something. But with the Special Raiders Direct coming in a couple weeks, exactly 13 days as of the day I'm posting this, we don't have long to wait for the next batch of information. Also, something I don't understand is the constant comparisons to Side Order. Maybe it's just due to recency bias. Remember, all the other single-player adventures, besides Octo Expansion, featured upgrade systems, and Raiders most certainly doesn't look like it's going to be a roguelite, like Side Order is. Yes, there will be upgrading to become stronger, but that's hardly a roguelite exclusive thing. In fact, the way Raiders seems structured, from what we've seen thus far, it seems more comparable to the other campaigns and a traditional RPG than a roguelite. What with the experience gain, leveling up, stat increases, skill points, unlocking / upgrading equipment with the collected currency, and so on. Anyways, that said, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed and that you came away knowing at least a bit more than you knew before you watched it. This has been Jaco, and bye!